A lone cougar stands motionless at the edge of a clearing. It's not actively searching, not straining to find its prey. Instead, it's doing something far more powerful. It's truly seeing what's in front of it and around it. Every subtle movement, every shift in the wind, every smell, every tiny detail that spells the difference between success and failure. You see, a predator doesn't succeed by trying to see its prey. It succeeds by seeing what is actually there and recognizing the patterns. I learned this lesson firsthand. You see, several years ago, while on a solo deer hunt in the national forest, I wanted to hunt in a similar way to early humans. I grabbed my bow and went walking into the forest. Around here, there are two popular methods for hunting deer. One is to simply sit in a raised stand in a tree or in a blind on the ground and wait for the deer to wander by, usually attracting it with scents and sounds. Or the other is to use dogs to flush out the deer from the other side of the forest toward your location. Not wanting to do this, I decided to go for a walk just to see what I could find. At first I was looking for the deer, trying to listen for their steps, their calls, and any other sounds common to them. After some walking, I noticed scrapings on a tree. Now I was taught that these signs indicated a deer presence, but I wasn't actively looking for them. It occurred to me that I actually found something without looking for the thing I was searching for. So I found evidence of the deer without actually finding the deer. It occurred to me that there was likely some other signs as well, so instead of looking for the deer, I started to observe everything else in the area, listening to birds, the insects, and looking at all of the tracks I found on the ground and on trees, and then orienting myself with the natural topography of the area and the ecosystem that I was in. I began to consider how the animals moved through the forest, between the dense vegetation or water sources in the area. After removing some of my own personal filters, I began to consider a much larger, holistic picture of the hunt and started to see more clearly without filters. I will say that that particular hunt was unsuccessful, but I learned something that day that went on to help me be more successful in the future, in hunting and in life. This fundamental difference between looking and truly seeing reveals something crucial about human perception. Most people aren't failing to see because they lack information. They're failing because they're trapped behind filters of their own making. Today we're going to explore why these filters exist, what they cost us, and most importantly, how to break free from them. Well, let's start with something that might make you a little uncomfortable. Everything you think you know is filtered. Every perception, every belief system, every obvious truth. It's all been shaped by these three powerful filtering systems. So I'll say the three major filters that I'll be speaking on today are as follows. The first filter, educational conditioning. Think back to your school days. What were you rewarded for? Was it for seeing things differently? For questioning the established ideas? Or for discovering new patterns? No. Our education system doesn't teach us how to see or to think. It simply teaches us what to know. From our earliest days, we're trained to look for the right answers instead of observing all the information that's there. We're taught to memorize instead of true understanding. We're taught to follow instead of discovering new paths. And we're also taught to accept reality instead of questioning it. Let's talk about the education system. You see, the American school system, as well as other educational systems around the world, is based on the Prussian model of education. Let's talk about the origins of that. The Prussian model originated in 16th century Germany, where Martin Luther, John Calvin, and others advocated for state-mandated public schooling. The goal of the Prussian model was to create a population of obedient, effective workers and soldiers for the state. The 19th century American politicians brought the Prussian model to the United States. The model was adopted because some believed it was the answer to creating good, orderly citizens. The Prussian model includes factory-like schools, which are schools run on factory bells, and students are sorted by age and taught the same subjects in the same ways. Kind of like the assembly line. Students are evaluated based on standardized assessments. This model also creates predictability and uniformity across the board, rather than supporting the diverse needs of different communities and individuals. Some say that the Prussian model has led to American schools that are extensions of the state, focused on compliance and uniformity, rather than preparing students to be independent, critical thinkers, and compassionate leaders. In summary, this education model has created strong filters on thinking. Another filter would be social programming. You see, educational filters are just the beginning. Society builds invisible walls in our minds, boundaries made of acceptable observations that we rarely even notice. Think about the last time you stopped yourself from saying what you truly observed because it wasn't socially acceptable to notice it. Think about a joke you wanted to tell because you found it funny, but hesitated because of the group of people you were with may find it offensive or inappropriate. That hesitation you felt, that's your social filtering at work. These social filters show up everywhere. They show up in political correctness that prevents honest observation, in the social media bubbles that reinforce our existing views, show up in the groupthink that plagues organizations, in the acceptable ways we're allowed to see things. The result? We don't see reality. We see a socially approved version of it, a filtered version. But perhaps the most dangerous filter comes from our own expertise itself. The very knowledge that makes us effective in our fields can become a prison that prevents us from seeing beyond our training. Think about it. Doctors sometimes miss non-medical solutions because they're trained to see everything through a specific medical lens or through their own specialty. Business leaders miss market shifts because they're experts in the old ways of doing things. Technical experts often can't see simple solutions because they're focused on complexity. I was working with an IT client once. They desperately needed to upgrade their slow, outdated office computers and server. Their old software wasn't able to be installed on the new operating systems. I worked on finding better and alternative software that was easier to use, more capable, and since it was SaaS or software as a service from a well-known company, would not be restricted by those software updates that caused problems with their previous systems. Another bonus was that this office could do away with their server machine, further saving money and space. But because of their own filters, they were simply unable to see past the server and into the cloud, and were afraid to take this step. I did what I could for them, but ultimately they decided to stay with the old system and their outdated machines. Fast forward a few months, and I get a call that their server and one of their other PCs, happened to be their bookkeeper, failed. Luckily for them, I started scheduled backups that went to a cloud drive to protect them for those critical software files. But at this moment, they realized that their own filters were making them vulnerable. Happy ending to the story, I was finally able to convince them to move forward and that I would be there to help with that transition. This incident helped them break through their own filters, and they have since been able to move on and even expand their observations and move into newer, better ways of thinking. Now you may be thinking, so what? What's the real cost of these filters? Well, that story I told you won, but these filters can have a personal cost. Every filter is a wall between you and reality. At a personal level, these filters cost you relationships because you are unable to see people as they truly are, not noticing those red flags. They cost you opportunities because you can't see what may be possible for the future. They cost you growth because it stops you from seeing your true potential. And they can cost you wisdom because you can't learn from what you cannot see. Think about the last time you were absolutely certain about something, only to find out later that you were wrong. That gap between your unjustified certainty and reality, yeah, that's the cost of your filters. Beyond the personal cost, you also have a professional cost. Because in business, filtered thinking isn't just expensive, it can be lethal to the business. I mean, hey, ask Kodak, who couldn't see the digital revolution because their film expertise filtered it out. Just ask Blockbuster, who were pushed out by Netflix because their retail expertise blinded them. Ask Nokia, a company that was focused solely on hardware excellence and failed to understand the importance of the software revolution. Businesses who cannot see past their own filters are doomed to fail. And then you have a societal cost of these filters. At a society level, these filters create echo chambers where we only see what confirms our existing beliefs and doesn't challenge our own ways of thinking. They create missed solutions because we filter out anything that doesn't fit our preconceived models of the world. And they create artificial divisions because we can't see common ground between our issues. And innovation barriers because we filter out possibilities that don't fit our existing filtered frameworks. So how do we break free? How do we return to pure, unfiltered observation? The answer lies in returning to natural observation. The kind of seeing that predator at the beginning of our discussion was doing. It means complete awareness and being present in the moment. No projection into the future, no baggage from the past, and just pure observation from what is without preconceptions. It's emotional neutrality. No judgment about what you see, no preference for what you find, and just clear recognition of what exists. It's pattern recognition, or looking for connections, noticing rhythms, and seeing systems in play. And it's about direct experience. No theoretical frameworks without observation. No preconceptions, and just direct contact with reality. So how do we make this concrete? How do you start? Well, the first thing I would recommend is pattern documentation practice. Spend 10 minutes each day just observing your environment. Write down any patterns you notice without overly analyzing them. These are patterns in your personal life, your professional life, and even in your relationships. Look for connections between different patterns and how they interact. Observe how patterns and cycles in your personal life also affect your professional life and vice versa. Notice what stands out and surprises you. The second practice is something that I would call a filter detection exercise. Question every always and never that's in your thinking. Those two words, always and never, are usually an indicator of your own biases and your own filters. Concepts like always and never are extremely rare in reality. Challenge your most basic assumptions. Observe and learn the counterpoints to your own beliefs. Test your beliefs against direct observation. What do you observe that is contrary to your beliefs? If you believe this one group is hateful, but you notice compassion coming from that group, then that should tell you that your beliefs are filtered. That goes into notice when you resist seeing something because of your preconceptions. This is the hardest part to accomplish, but it's where your filters will start crumbling. Most every morning, I consider the patterns around me and how they all interact. I look at my calendar, see what's going on there, the weather, work tasks, and my personal daily practices, and see where these patterns intersect and use these observations to maximize my potential for the day. Now it's your turn. For the next 24 hours, I challenge you to document every time you catch yourself filtering reality. Write down at least one pattern that you notice in nature and one pattern that you notice in your life. Question at least one truth that you've always accepted to be true, but your observations might show otherwise. And remember, truth doesn't need filters. Nature speaks in patterns, and clear sight leads to clear action. In the comments below, share the filter you've identified in your thinking, share a pattern you've noticed but probably ignored, and share a truth that you're questioning now. I hope this video has helped you consider your own filters, and that you will be able to break through some of those filters to open up your mind and consider new ways of being. Apply these practices into your personal life. Apply them into your professional life. If you have a business, work with those filters and those cycles and those patterns into your business, and even notice them in your relationships. Hope it was able to help. More to come. Follow along.